Hi guys, welcome back to Crow's Whisper Tarot. Today we're going to be looking at your future child and getting little facts about who they are, their personality, and also the circumstances that might happen before they come into being. So potentially that could be when you find out you're pregnant, or could be around the time that they are born. So let's have a look at the reading. Alright everyone, here are the piles. We have pile 1, pile 2 and pile 3. Take your time selecting your piles and we'll head straight into the reading. Welcome pile 1 to your reading. We start off with the 5 of Wands. 5 of Wands is an interesting energy to sort of come about, because this could be that the child is highly competitive and that is a significant part of who they are. It can also be that there's someone who doesn't deal with loss very well, and so they can have a lot of tantrums. They can be a little more expressive when it comes to things that they don't like, and so you might find that as a significant characteristic for them. But we'll have a look at the other cards that have popped up as well. The other card that you had was Horse Spirit, Freedom is Yours. So again, they can be highly competitive, but they can also be someone with a lot of ambition, a lot of things that they want to do. And so later on in life, you might find they love to explore, to find things that work for them, to find, the type of people that suit them. They might be a very good traveler. And so, lots of going to different countries, going to different places, getting to know a lot of different people. They are sort of a freelance in the sense that they like to do things on their own. They don't really enjoy team spirit. This does give me the vibe of a wild stallion in a sense, where they can't really be controlled as well as you would hope. So you might find that there's someone with a lot of internal drama that sort of builds up over time. You find it very hard to sometimes get to know them because they tend to almost have a facade of being strong. And over time that can show up in numerous different ways, but when they're younger especially, you might find that they're very opinionated when it comes to things they like and don't like, and when things don't go their way, they can be a little more aggressive to express that necessarily. So let's have a look at your additional cards. We have the 6 of Swords, the 6 of Coins, and the Wheel of Fortune. It's interesting because with Horse Spirit it was 3-3, and then we have 2 cards with 6s on them. So again, they can be someone who might find team dynamics really tricky, or might find finding the right people for themselves to be something that they really struggle with over time. And especially when it comes to finding people that they can trust, that they can help and support and then receive that back. Especially with that 6 of Coins, it does feel like they really want to connect well to the people around them and to people who match their energy and make them feel good in a sense. It does feel like, again, they go on a lot of journeys and sort of venture out to try and find their community and people who feel right to them. And you might also find that in their journey to getting there, they actually grow really well as a person. They come into themselves when they move to different locations. So potentially you might find that you end up sending them to numerous different schools just because you want them to, 1, have a really good experience, but 2, they didn't fit in previously, and so they constantly might find that they need to find the right people for them, and so go on these journeys for themselves to sort of find people who suit them and people who they can relate to and express. And it does come really significantly that when they sort of find their community, things just go super smoothly for them. Until that point in time, they're going to have a lot of internal struggles, but once they find their community and the people who suit them best, they're going to really shine and become their best possible selves. And as surprising as it is for you perhaps with the group that they end up with, it's actually people who will support them throughout their life. So they get lifelong friends through this journey, and it's something that takes time. But again, it leads them into being a much stronger person, a much more controlled person when it comes to, again, that Five of Wands energy of how they express themselves and how they sort of deal with loss and struggle and things like that. They're very good at sort of building themselves up through this community that they have. So all very exciting things. So let's have a look. That popped out significantly. Two of Cups. For some of you, this can be more so of a time thing, but when you feel like you're in a space where you feel like you've settled, you're with the right person, in the right environment, things feel like are organized in life and things are really smooth sailing, you're going to find that potentially you might hear about or feel their conception. And that is something that you might realize over time. But that sort of stability, the circumstances where you feel safe and protected and that you're in the right environment for you, and that, you know, you're feeding into that energy, I guess, when you find out you're pregnant with this kid. It definitely feels like your environment indicates for this to be more possible, I suppose. We have the Two of Wands and the Magician. So, again, lots of twos. Numbers might be significant for some of you, I don't know, but we have Two of Wands. They sort of do mimic each other in terms of the Wands and Swords sort of aligning together. You might find, in addition to that circumstance of, you know, being in the right environment for their birth or conception, you might also find that being, like, having a goal and working towards that goal and you're very close to achieving it might also trigger your pregnancy with this as well. You might also find that these circumstances tend to shift over time. What I mean by that is you might be feeling like you've got your goals straight, things are working out, and then suddenly you realize, oh wait, I can also do this in addition to that. And so you're really using the tools that you have in mind. You might actually gain more knowledge or education or even just skills that it seems to develop really quickly at this time that things are happening. So that's the way you might be able to identify what sort of circumstances this is. I just want to have a look at your relationship to this future child, what it's going to be like, things to expect. The Guardian of Swords or the Queen of Swords, the Seven of Cups reversed, the Ace of Wands reversed, the Guardian of Pentacles reversed, and the Seven of Wands reversed. So, in terms of your relationship to this child, it does feel like you provide a lot of mental clarity. You provide a lot of encouragement, a lot of things and strategies, especially with them going through this sort of emotional turmoil, to sort of ground them a little bit better. It does feel like they're sort of hyper-focused on their emotions rather than sort of thinking things through. And so what you are able to provide is a pathway that is super clear for them to see, okay, so I'm feeling these emotions, this is how I should deal with it, this is, you know, how I can sort of manage it better. Like, you teach them the strategies that they need to be a little more calm, be a little more, I guess, functional is a element to that, but the way they can utilize their emotions for benefit rather than sort of being in sort of this chaos that ends up with them being a bit sort of burnt out or hyper explosive or just going through like extremes. And so you're able to sort of help them sort of hone into that a little bit better, be more hyper be more aware of how they sort of, communicate and things like that. You might also find that you're someone that they can open up to a lot quickly, like really quickly. They're able to truly express themselves to you, and you're sort of the person that they rely on. So they tell you all their ambitions, all their goals, all their, emotional frustrations, and that's probably why initially you might find that you take the brunt of their emotions in a sense, because they just feel really comfortable expressing that to you. You might also find that they act a certain way to other people, and then to you they show all their, I suppose, negative traits that they haven't quite honed into, especially when they're younger. But that's because they feel like you're someone who they're very comfortable expressing these things to. So what they find is that you provide that sort of advice and that grounding where they can really, truly be themselves, that is in a productive sense. And so it's something that they gain over time. I also think that they're someone who gives a lot of physical affection, regardless of, their personality and how they sort of communicate. I think throughout their entire childhood into adulthood, they're someone who is very good at physical affection, and so they'll definitely give you a lot of hugs, a lot of kisses. They might also just really like cuddling up to you, especially when they're younger, but the reason is, again, you are the most comfortable person, or parent I should say, in this relationship, and so they respond to you really, really well. Anything else that is popping up? You might find that they end up in the same field of work later down the track to you, because they sort of want to emulate you in some sense. So you might find that as well. But that was, I think, your reading, pile 1. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Hello, pile 2. Welcome to your reading on your future child. The first card that we have is the 9 of Wands reversed. So, interesting energy to start off with. The 9 of Wands technically represents being in a state where you're able to really push through, have a lot of determination, consistency, being able to have a really strong routine. However, seeing as this is in reverse, you might find that your future child is someone who's a little bit more chaotic. They're not a workaholic. They're someone who really likes to take their time with things. And you might also find that they are a very good procrastinator, more than anything. And so it can lead to a little bit of a struggle, but most of the time they sort of use this energy to sort of dabble into as many things as possible, rather than, having a lot of consistency and being able to go through a routine with things. They're someone who really likes to push the boundaries a bit, try and explore as much as possible. They're not sort of hyper focused on one thing. They're sort of spread out to having like 10 hobbies that they sort of try and dabble into all the time, rather than just a single one. So you might find that when they're younger, they tend to have a lot of random interests that pop up, and they really want to aspire to it. And so you end up going to sports, karate, all sorts of other like art, music, whatever hobby they end up with, you just end up doing. And so your schedule will be packed, but they will be spreading their time evenly almost between all subjects, and they might not be like hyper focused on doing well, but they certainly try their best with whatever comes into their mind. We have Rabbit Spirit with Now is a Lucky Time, and we have Vulture Spirit with Nothing is Wasted. It's very interesting. So both of these energies are very good with the heart chakra, and also a little bit with the sacral chakra. Essentially, it means that they are very good at relating to other people, very good at creating, relationships with other people, very good communicators. You might also find that there's someone who once they get something in their head, they're not willing to let it go. They're very good with dealing with their ambitions and their goals and sort of setting expectations for themselves. The only thing is, again, they're a bit of a procrastinator. They don't always like hyper focus and hone into what they need to do. And so that might lead them astray a bit, but they do have a very solid goal that they have in mind, and they're willing to put in at least the thought process of what they want to do. The action part, I think, is something that they might continue to work through in life. So we have the Seven of Swords as well, the Two of Coins reversed, the Four of Swords reversed, and the Ace of Wands reversed. So, in terms of their personality and what they sort of bring to the table, it does feel like they're someone who really wants to put in effort for themselves, but they do it in a way that is very unexpected. They don't always follow patterns. They don't always do the work the way it's intended to, which can initially cause a lot of sidetracking or potentially difficulty during school, just because the way their mind's orientated is sort of always out of the box thinking. They don't want to sort of just follow a pathway that's set out for them. So if they're given instructions for, let's say, a recipe, they're going to eyeball, not use the measurements given, just eyeball, follow their intuition with it, and that's how they like to go about things. Does it always work out? No, but they're someone who does things that are not consistent with what is preferred. And so they are definitely a very much out-of-the-box thinker. Their mind is always running, and no one can truly read their mind but themselves, unfortunately. It is one of those things where the way their mind works can't really be understood as easily as you would like. It doesn't mean that you can't sort of think ahead of them and follow, what they want, but it is more of a struggle compared to, if they were more of a straightforward child. Doesn't seem that way. They definitely have a lot of ambition and a lot of things that they want to achieve, but the way I am seeing this at the moment is they dabble in a lot of things, and it seems random and it seems like nothing sort of makes sense, so they jump from one subject to the other. They don't stay understanding that subject very long, but in the time that they do spend on it, they actually retain that information pretty significantly, and so later down the track they're actually able to utilize those skills. Even if it's been like 5-10 years down the track since they've learned it, they're still able to utilize those skills and make the most of it and actually retain the fundamentals of that skill really, really well. And so I would say initially you might find that they get sidetracked a lot, they sort of jump subjects, but in actuality they're able to really make sure that they're having a solid understanding before they move to the next stage. They're definitely a very smart kid, I will say. Very, very smart kid. But I guess they haven't figured out quite how to maintain and utilize their opinions to the best of their ability. So let's have a quick look as to what your relationship with them might be like. The Five of Pentacles reversed, the Four of Wands, the Seven of Swords reversed, the Four of Pentacles reversed, the High Priestess, and the Ten of Cups reversed. So ultimately, what I'm seeing is their relationship to you is actually really strong. They're someone who can't lie to you, and they really struggle later down the track. When they do start trying to hide things and sort of shield away from it, they really struggle to lie to you, and you know their tells so well, so they can't really escape anything. And whenever they feel like they're down, they lack energy, they don't feel like they're understood well enough, they will come to you. You're essentially someone that brings a lot of joy and a lot of spark to them, and I get the sense that they're caught up in their head a lot of the time, and so they actually might like being in your presence just because you tend to relax things down, make things more fun, more entertaining, and less sort of serious in a sense, is what I'm getting. They also, and for some, I feel like you just have very good intuition as to how they're feeling at the time, and so they always are very comfortable coming up to you, discussing things, feeling like they can express themselves really well with you, and you just give off a very warm, comforting energy, and so they just want to spend more time with you. And I feel like even later down the track, when they're older, it does feel like they're someone who will come over and just chat, and that's all they want, is just to have a nice conversation with you, and that's all they need to feel like they're nurtured and feeling secure. And I feel like that's something that you sort of delve into a little bit, especially with, you know, all the topics that they have and all these ambitions that they have in their mind. They're not able to necessarily hone into those as quickly, and so discussing with you, I feel like, sets little markers and alarms that go off on different topics that they feel like you end up telling them a solution that they didn't realize they needed. And so over time you might find that they are very good, more frequent in asking you questions and advice and things like that. So that is very nice. Very excited for you. And in terms of circumstances where you might find out that you are pregnant, we have the Explorer of Swords reversed, the Ten of Wands reversed, and the Elder of Cups reversed. So with this, I would say in terms of circumstances that might occur before you find out you are pregnant, most likely you are going to be traveling to a location that you did not want to go to. And more specifically, it's going to be related to a family event, potentially a family member or a friend or acquaintance that you really don't want to meet. But that's sort of what triggers things to go down, so to speak. It does mean that you're going to have a lot of conflict in your mind. You're going to feel like this isn't really what I wanted. I don't really want to go there. And it does feel like this is not in your usual location. It's going to be either overseas or in a completely different state. And so you end up moving to that location and finding out that you are pregnant. But otherwise, that was your reading, Pile 2. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Welcome, Pile 3, to your reading. You guys picked out the Wheel of Fortune reversed. So with the Wheel of Fortune reversed, it does seem like your future child is going to be very ambitious, very lucky. You might also find that they go through a number of scenarios that really, like, significant events that really build their character. And so there's someone who might goes through multiple transformations. They also go through multiple cycles where they almost completely change and completely mature as quickly as you would expect. We also have Buffalo Spirit with abundance. The abundant universe will provide. So they can be someone who is particularly spiritual, whether that is just very good at meditation and self-care, or they could be into the occult as well, potentially. They also are very good at building a solid foundation for themselves in terms of their character and what they are looking for. They also have a very strong sense of self, is the other thing that I was picking up on. And for some of you, they could also be very attuned to their higher self, in a sense. I feel like they're someone who really relies on their intuitive qualities to sort of guide them. And we had the King of Cups that sort of flipped over halfway through. The King of Cups is interesting because it shows that they're someone who is very mature, very intellectual. I feel like later down the track, you might find that they give very good unsolicited advice. I feel like over time, you might find that they're giving you more advice than you are giving them. And it's something that I feel like you're definitely going to end up joking about over time, is just how much they really are someone who pushes themselves to the max to try and, you know, inform people about things. It does feel like they're slightly more introverted, but with the Two of Swords reversed, the Six of Wands reversed, the Ten of Coins reversed, and the Chariot, ultimately they're someone who knows their self-worth really well. They might find it a little bit challenging to adapt to new scenarios, and especially when it comes to like their way of speaking, they might be someone who sort of mumbles their words a little bit. They might sort of shy away from talking in public a little bit more, but it does feel like when they do need to, they're very good at what they do. They're very good at speech. They're very good at presenting their ideas clearly. But when it comes to pressure and group scenarios, they don't do so well. And it's something that they'll definitely have to build over time. But as personality trait wise, they really value tradition, and they really value family, and they value the ability that, you know, you can find a really solid community about them. They might struggle with feeling comfortable around other people. I feel like they're very good on their own and being on their own and having that solo energy, but it does feel like over time they get more adapt to being in different scenarios, being able to be more creative and find their right path for themselves. And you might find that they do their best when they have a chance to really think on themselves, build on their opinions and what they want to create, and the way they want to sort of go about life is something that is very unique to them, and it's not something that comes easily for them. It feels like they really have to take the time and energy to sort of create themselves into this sort of entertaining, shiny person, when especially it's not their personality to be that way, but they really put in the effort to try their best to get into that mindset and get into that energy of being in the spotlight. And it does feel like to some extent they're going to be either a leader or a head of a certain, I guess, organization, or just figurehead, especially now with the internet. Hard to say. They could be an influencer, but they are going to be in a personality type where they will have to at some point be in the spotlight. And so they're going to go through multiple cycles that is going to build their character, make them stronger, make them into a completely different personality to what they currently are. And that sort of build of that character is going to be so significant. It's going to create a lot of shifts in themselves and in the people around them as well. Again, they're very good at advice. So you might find, especially when they're younger, that their friends, the people around them, will always, even if they're the youngest sibling, the older siblings will also ask them for advice. And so that's something that might happen as well. They're just very good at, I don't know if it's reading people, but they're very good at understanding what the other person wants to hear. So that's something to keep in mind too. In terms of their personality, let's have a quick look. We got the Six of Wands a second time, but this time upright. The Three of Cups reversed. And the Child of Cups, or the Page of Cups. I think, especially when they're younger, they're the type of person who wears their heart on their sleeve. They're someone who really tries to emulate, other people. They try and copy exactly the way they speak, the way they conduct themselves, and so you might see them sort of shifting within friend groups and acting completely differently. You might see them sort of, for some of you it could be that they're too shy, so they'll be sort of stand back in friend groups, but you might also find that depending on who they interact with, they completely change their way of speaking and the way they conduct themselves. You might also find that their star quality is something that you can see, but they really struggle to see that side of them. And so they tend to shy away from that side of them until they've gone through, again, all these stages. So they could have been really bright, really cheerful, sort of almost like love being in the spotlight when they're younger. But then as their personality grows and they start developing feelings like shame and embarrassment of like being in the spotlight, you're going to see that fade down a bit until they learn to build it up again. But in terms of your relationship with your future child, let's have a bit of a look. Oh, we have the Lovers reversed. I think you have a very good way of connecting to them. It almost feels like you're two peas in a pod when it comes to the personality traits, and for some of you appearance as well. They could be very similar in appearance to you, but in terms of personality traits and how they conduct themselves, they're going to be quite similar to you. I think over time, you can definitely build a really strong relationship with them. In fact, you could actually build the strongest relationship with them. In terms of a family unit, you can also find that there's almost like this slow progression in terms of understanding each other and finding out what's right for you, and this sort of relationship takes a long time to sort of build up. It is a strong relationship. It does feel like you have a very strong relationship with them, but to get to that point where you can rely on each other and trust each other and move past the point of being mother and child and more to being almost friends, like that's a scenario that I feel like you're going to end up having later down the track. It's not going to feel like just a mother-child or father-child relationship. It is going to be a bit of a process, I feel, with their constant development and constant growth. You're going to find that sometimes it's really hard to understand them from that perspective because they sort of go through so many transitions within themselves. It becomes harder and harder to sometimes read them, but in a way it's sort of better because they can be more independent that way. So in terms of circumstances in which you might finding circumstances in which you find out you might be with child, we have Judgment reversed. So you could be going through a very significant transition in your life. It can also be that you're going through a time where you're finally getting to where you want to be in life. You have the circumstances laid out perfectly. The scenario is almost completely straightforward. For some of you, you could feel like you know that you're going to be with child within a period of time. You could have an innate sense of that. But it does feel like, in terms of circumstances, it's super clear that you know exactly where you want to go. For some of you, you might meet someone who is older, who will sort of hint at it or give signs of it, that this might happen. Even if it's like an offhanded comment, it sort of sticks with you really significantly, and so that sort of carries on. It could be that they get your intuitive traits from you as well. But again, it feels like a very intuitive process that you know that you are going to have this child. And so that's something to look forward to. So that was your reading, Pile 3. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.